Yeah.
Okay, welcome guys. Have a seat.
Sit on now.
As a reminder, today we're videotaping. So, if you want to make a silly face at the camera, now's the time. Wave, say hello. So we'll all be good. Hi, camera.
Hello.
Okay. All right, Rudy, get it out of your system.
Rudy?
Go ahead. Go ahead. This is your chance.
Hello.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it is on. Sweet.
Yeah, it's on. Okay, have a seat.
Wait, is my head gonna block it?
No, your head is not going to block.
No, you're short. You're good.
I'm short.
Yeah.
Miguel, you can check for Gabby. Just peek in the view screen and see if Gabby's head is blocking it.
You're good.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right.
I still want to sit there.
So today we're going to start our unit on the Cold War. Woo! What can you guys tell me about the Cold War? And I'm sorry, I was
Actually,
cold, so.
Was it cold?
Miguel?
It was a war that was not really fought.
Good. It was a war that we didn't fight. Rudy?
Oh, actually, I have a question. Did JFK president during the time of the Cold War? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, he was at the beginning. Okay. So, to start us off on the Cold War, I want you guys to read this comic, and for this table, it says, on no account to be used because the enemy might retaliate. And it says HZ, bombs, Y rocket. What do you guys think this cartoon is telling us? I don't need anything today, but thank you. So, see if this is comic.
One thing for you to
Gabby?
That pretty much both sides of the war were armed and prepared, but nobody wanted to do anything because they didn't want anyone to fight back.
Good. All right. Why didn't we want anyone to fight back?
And then you're done.
We weren't stable enough for war?
Well, we were stable enough for war. We just come out of World War II, right? But what's the thing about nuclear weapons?
Oh, they're nuclear.
They're nuclear, right? What does that mean?
Highly destructive and
Go
dangerous.
ahead, Rainy.
They can destroy the city.
Yep. Weapons of mass destruction. Very good. What can you guys tell me about weapons of mass destruction?
They cause mass destruction.
Oh, wow.
Good, Rudy. What else can you tell me?
They are very deadly, it's highly advised to not use them because they're basically overpowered. Basically,
Good.
kind of no point in using them.
So, there's still problems with radiation in Hiroshima today, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, when you use a weapon of mass destruction like that, you take out a lot of people. And you make that area almost uninhabitable. You know, you can't grow crops in Hiroshima today. You know, there's a lot of bad effects. People still have birth defects. Sorry, what was that, Rudy?
Other things are noble. With the nuclear meltdown.
Yeah, there's high rates of cancer. So there's a lot that happens when you do that. All right, so to help tie this in today, who wants to read this comic for me? Gabby's hand is up first.
How I long for the good old days of the Cold War when things were so much safer than they are today. Back when Soviet nukes were pointed at every American city, we really felt that our oceans kept us safe. And back when
Khrushchev
was threatening to
Khrushchev.
bury us and banging the shoe on the table, we really thought we were up against a same enemy we could reason with. What the hell are you talking about? You wouldn't understand. You love the terrorists. You want to marry them.
Okay, who can tell me why that's funny? All right, let's break it down. What is the eagle? But it's not an eagle.
Yeah, I don't really
Have you guys ever heard of war hawks? Yeah, right, war hawks, people who want to make war. They think it's good for the economy, we're making weapons, we're out spreading American ideals, right?
So
And the elephant is the other political parties, right?
you won't be.
Traditionally, it does mean Republican. In this case, it's not necessarily a Republican versus Democrat issue. It's about the war hawks versus elephants. Are in comics tend to be portrayed as more scaredy cats, right? They're scared of mice. So it's, you know, the more peace-loving people. So the elephant's saying he prefers the Cold War because why?
Because there was actually no fighting.
Yeah, and because Randy said it earlier with MAD. Who knows what that stands for?
Man.
What does MAD stand for? It's going to be in your academic language when we read this chapter.
Mass Armageddon.
Nope, not Mass Armageddon. Mutually assured destruction. So we drop a bomb on the Russians and they drop a bomb on us. They drop a bomb on us, we drop a bomb on the Russians. So the idea is that we would know it was coming and would have time to retaliate before it got to us. So there was no first strike capability, right? So this is an important idea because it's part of what kept us from ever escalating in the Cold War, right? So our elephant here, our peace-loving elephant, is yearning for the days of the Cold War when we didn't have to worry, right? Because we knew they could blow us up and they knew we could blow them up, so nobody was blowing anyone up. Rudy?
There was absolutely no fighting whatsoever during the Cold War, as in, or it was...
There were no bullets fired and there were no battles. You know, they shot down a U-2 plane. I don't remember if we shot anything down specifically. I'll have to look that up. But there were no battles. There was no actual fighting. There were no soldiers that were deployed where there was any actual fighting between men, right? It was just a war. It was a Cold War, and that there were no bullets, right? No ammunition, other than our bombs that we could drop on each other at any time. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. It's meant to put it a little bit in perspective, and then I want you to compare it to what we see today. So who knows what's going on in the world right now with Russia? No? Any takers? Mrs. Thomas, what's going on in the world today with Russia?
Vladimir Putin is acting more like a dictator than an elected president.
Yeah.
He is interested in keeping the Ukraine as part of the Russian sphere of influence.
Yep.
Their president has gone elsewhere, and he also has troops down in the Crimea because that's an important warm water port for Russian exports and imports.
So guys, this is a map of the Soviet Union before the fall of communism. Mrs. Thomas is talking about right down here. Putin has, to the agreement of the international community, illegally occupied part of the Ukraine and doesn't seem in a hurry to leave anytime soon. He claims he's protecting the rights of ethnic speaking peoples who speak Russian and that he's protecting them. The truth is, according to the U.S., is that there was an election this last year and a large part of the country wanted to become more enmeshed with Europe and with the EU for trading and negotiations, and Russia didn't like that. So they've occupied part of Ukraine illegally, according to international treaty. Rudy?
So there's a cartoon supposedly stating that somehow, okay, it says Russia, so I'm guessing that's supposed to be Putin. So, does that mean he's kind of moving things to a point where it's going to end up another Cold War?
That's the implication, right? Because they're chipping away at the ice.
So he's trying to...
So it's almost like we're bringing the Cold War back, right? We don't want to go to war with Russia. We're in the same position we were back when the Iron Curtain fell in '91, right? So, but where does that leave us? Because Putin is illegally occupying the Ukraine. So, you know, is the world going to put together a coalition force, an army, and put troops in there and say that Putin has to leave? What do you guys think? You guys think we're going to war with Russia anytime soon? Probably not.
Probably not.
So right now, since there's no consensus on what further action to take, and Russia and Putin do not seem to be giving back the Ukraine, right now there is no action. So there are bombs continuing to go off and fighting, even though there's a ceasefire between militant forces in the Ukraine. And part of this whole scenario is that for the first part of the conflict, Putin claimed that he was not in any way aiding the rebels in the Ukraine, which of course we've since found out that there are Russian troops there, they're getting Russian weapons and bullets and supplies, right? So we know that's not true. But nobody has agreed how they want to take action yet. So it is probably going to mean that there won't be any action taken. Okay. Let's see. Why don't you guys tell me Let's go ahead and open your books to page, find it, 531. We're going to read. But the important thing to understand is that the psychological impact on the society of both the U.S. and the USSR coming out of World War II, right? How do you think we felt after World War II? Were we kind of done with the war?
World War II, let's see. Weren't we even better than we were before? Because industries had grown, new inventions had been invented. I think we had like, a lot of money because of a lot of revenue because of all the funding that went into the war effort.
So that's a double-edged sword, right? Because we're pumping a lot of money into Europe and into Japan to rebuild both in the form of loans. And we have to retool all of our factories because we're no longer making tanks and bullets, right? We've got to make cars and toasters and other things that U.S. citizens need. And they need to have jobs. You know, women who have gone to work during World War II are now expected to stop working, give their jobs back up to returning men, and come home, right? Go back into the home, raise their children like they did before the war. So that's an interesting piece going on in our society at the time. And then, what do we have going on the other side of the world? We have, who are we in mutually assured destruction with? We just were talking about it. The country. Russia. Good. So we're in mutually assured destruction with Russia because, to begin with, right after World War II, we were the only ones with a nuclear weapon, right? With the atomic bomb. But that made everyone else really uneasy. So we have an arms race on, right? Who can get it next? Okay. So, just so you guys know where we're going with this, once we complete our reading together, we're going to go into groups and discuss. You guys are going to complete your cause and effect diagram. I'm going to collect these as you guys head out of class. And then you guys are going to write a couple paragraphs justifying why the U.S. and the USSR felt that they had to spread their spheres of influence. So before we hop into that, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Who wants to volunteer to read the first section? Okay, Rudy, and then we'll go to Gabby. So, Cold War superpowers face off.
During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union had joined forces to fight against the Germans. The Soviet Army marched west, the Americans marched east. When the Allied soldiers met at the Elbe River in Germany in 1945, they embraced each other warmly because they had defeated the Nazis. Their leaders, however, regarded each other much more coolly. This animosity caused by competing political philosophies would lead to a nearly half-century of conflict called the Cold War.
Okay, keep going.
Allies become enemies. Even before World War II ended, the U.S. alliance with the Soviet Union had begun to unravel. The United States was upset that Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, had signed a non-aggression pact with Germany in 1939. Later, Stalin blamed the Allies for not invading Germany. German-occupied Europe earlier than 1944. Driven by these and other disagreements, the two allies began to pursue opposing goals. The Yalta Conference, a post-war plan. The war was not yet over in February 1945, but the leaders of the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union met at the Soviet Black Sea resort of Yalta. There they agreed to divide Germany into zones of occupation controlled by Allied military forces. Germany also would have the Soviet Union to compensate for its loss of life and poverty. Stalin agreed to join the war against Japan. He also promised that Eastern Europeans would have free elections. The skeptical Winston Churchill predicted that Stalin would keep his pledge only if the Eastern Europeans followed a policy friendly to Russia. Creation of the United Nations. In June 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union temporarily set aside their differences. They joined 48 other countries in the forming of the United Nations, or the UN. This international organization was intended to protect the members against aggression. It was based in New York. The charter for the new peacekeeping organization established a large body called the General Assembly. There, each UN member UN member nation could cast its vote on a broad range of issues. An 11-member body called the Security Council had the real power to investigate and settle disputes, though. Its 5 permanent members were Britain, China, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union. Each could veto any Security Council action. This provision was intended to prevent any members of the Council from voting as a bloc to override the others, deferring U.S. and Soviet goals. Despite agreement at Yalta and the presence on the Security Council, the United States and the Soviet Union split sharply after the war. The war had affected them very differently. The United States, the world's richest and most powerful country, suffered 400,000 deaths, but its cities and factories remained intact. The Soviet Union had at least 50 times as many fatalities. One in 4 Soviets was wounded or killed. Also, many Soviet cities were demolished. These contrasting situations, as well as the political and economic differences, affected the two countries' post-war goals.
Okay. Gabby, would you read Eastern Europe's Iron Curtain?
A major goal of the Soviet Union was to shield itself from another invasion from the West. Centuries of history had taught the Soviets to fear invasion. Because it lacked natural western borders, Russia fell victim to each of its neighbors in turn. In the 17th century, the Poles captured the Kremlin. During the next century, the Swedes attacked. Napoleon overran Moscow in 1812. The Germans invaded Russia during World Wars I and II. Soviets built a buffer. As World War II drew to a close, the Soviet troops pushed the Nazis back across the Eastern Europe. At war's end, these troops occupied a strip of countries along the Soviet Union's own western border. Stalin regarded these countries as a necessary buffer, or wall of protection. He ignored the Yalta Agreement and installed or secured communist governments in Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Poland, and Yugoslavia. The Soviet leader's American partner at Yalta, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had died on April 12, 1945. To Roosevelt's successor, Harry S. Truman, Stalin's reluctance to allow free elections in Eastern Europe nations was a clear violation of those countries' rights. Truman, Stalin, and Churchill met at Potsdam, Germany in July 1945. There, Truman pressed Stalin to permit free elections in Eastern Europe. The Soviet leader refused. In a speech in early 1946, Stalin declared that communism and capitalism could not exist in the same world. An Iron Curtain divides East and West. Europe now lay divided between East and West. Germany has been split into 2 sections. The Soviets controlled the eastern part, including half of the capital, Berlin. Under a communist government, East Germany was named the German Democratic Republic. The western zones became Federal Republic of Germany in 1949. Winston Churchill described the division of Europe. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in Soviet sphere and are all subject in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and increasing measure of control from Moscow. Churchill's phrase, Iron Curtain, came to represent Europe's division into mostly democratic Western Europe and communist Eastern Europe.
Okay, so let's pause there and let me raise this up. Can you all see the map, the Cold War map? Okay. So, what is this black line called? The Iron Curtain, right? And who coined that phrase?
Winston Churchill.
Good, Winston Churchill. So, as you just read, the Soviet Union, formerly Russia, had been invaded over and over and over again, right, throughout history. Because one of the nice things about Switzerland and why they always get to remain neutral is because they have a nice big mountain range that goes all around them, right? So, yes, they do. They have mountains that go and surround Switzerland. So that's why it's a naturally defined border using the mountains, and they have yet to be invaded because, frankly, it's not worth the trouble, and there aren't a lot of natural resources there. So, for people to steal, unless you are really worried about your cheese supply. So, yeah, see? I can still make you guys laugh. Right. Good call. So without a natural border here, right, there's nothing to keep those armies from just marching through and taking over. What cities did we hear about? We heard about Moscow, So here's Warsaw, Poland.
Yugoslavia.
Yeah, well,
Poland,
Yugoslavia's
Romania.
down here, and it's not even on this map yet. Well, sorry, Yugoslavia's up on this map. Czechoslovakia is up here. It's now the Czech Republic and Slovakia. It's now 2 different countries in modern day. So
Romania.
what they did is they used this nice border, and what were these called? Does anyone know? Soviet.
Soviet.
We haven't read it yet. I'm
Oh.
testing your prior knowledge.
Oh.
They're called Soviet satellites. They're satellite states. Kind of like a moon is called a satellite of planet Earth, right? So these are satellite states. So they're not technically, Russia never claimed and just absorbed them in. They gave them the appearance of some autonomy. Although, as you just read, did Stalin let there be free and fair elections? No. So instead, they had communist governments that reported back up to the USSR, right? Okay. So this is the world we're facing. So I think the analogy you can best use when talking about spheres of influence is, you just heard that Stalin didn't think communism and capitalism could exist, right, together. Okay, so he's building up a border, and it's like germs, right? So what they're doing is they're worried about the spread of the disease of communism or the disease of capitalism and democracy. So that's why there was a, quote, iron curtain, because they didn't want one to spread one way and the other to spread the other way. Does that make sense, Rudy?
So then it wasn't an imaginary border, it was a real border, or?
In most places it was a fence, but like, have you learned at all about the Berlin Wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the Berlin Wall was an actual wall. So Stalin moved troops in overnight and stopped the free movement of people between East and West Germany, right? And then we'll learn about this, but have you guys learned about the Berlin airlift? Rudy?
Wait, so Stalin was in control of East Germany?
So what happened was Stalin's troops kept marching towards Berlin, and our troops diverted because Marshall was really concerned with controlling and supporting his troop lines. So he led Stalin march to Berlin, and he veered off to meet German forces further south, which was very upsetting to some Americans and some American commanders because they had been told all along that they were marching for Berlin. So Stalin got to Berlin first. Now later, we sent some troops to Berlin, but Berlin is situated right in the middle, as you can see, of East Germany, right? So when Stalin closed it off, we had no way to get supplies to these troops, which is how we started with the Berlin airlift, which was when we, I forget the statistic, maybe the book will tell us, but we were landing something like a plane every minute with supplies. And I don't, Mrs. Thomas, did this class watch the video? That would
The
have
only
been
class that watched was period 3.
Third period, okay. So you guys will get to watch a video on the Berlin airlift. That'll give you an idea of what Berliners were facing when suddenly they were cut off from Western supplies. You know, and as a side note, when all of this is happening, you know, German forces at the end of World War II were going around the countryside in France and other places looking for Americans to surrender to, because the Russian policy was to shoot most Germans. They didn't let them surrender, whereas the Americans would let you surrender, take your guns, feed you, before sending you, you know, back to be repatriated. So there's a lot of enmity already between Germans, right, and Russia, and here they are, they're being occupied. And we have this iron wall coming down, which in the case of Berlin and the Berlin Wall was an actual physical wall where troops walked along the top from each side and was guarded from each side, right, with barbed wire and everything. Okay, Gabby, do you want to pick someone else to read the next section? The United States tries to contain Soviets.
Nancy.
Read loudly, please, Nancy.
U.S.-Soviet relations continued to worsen in 1946 and 1947. An increasingly worried United States tried to offset the growing Soviet threat to Eastern Europe. President Truman adopted a foreign policy called containment. It was a policy directed at blocking Soviet influence and stopping the expansion of communism. Containment policies included forming alliances and helping many countries resist Soviet advances. The Truman Doctrine. In a speech asking Congress for foreign aid for Turkey and Greece, Truman contrasted democracy with communism. One way of life is based upon the will of the majority and is distinguished by free institutions, free elections, and freedom from political oppression. The second way of life is based upon the will of the minority, forcibly imposed upon the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, fixed elections, and the suppression of personal freedom. I believe it must be the policy of the United States to support free people resisting attempted subjugation, control by armed minorities, or by outside pressures. Truman's support for countries that rejected communism was called the Truman Doctrine. It caused great controversy. Some opponents objected to American interference in other nations' affairs. Others argued that the United States could not afford to carry on a global crusade against communism. Congress, however, immediately authorized more than $400 million in aid to Turkey and Greece. The Marshall Plan. Much of Western Europe lay in ruins after the war. There was also economic turmoil, scarcity of jobs and food. In 1947, U.S. Secretary of State George Marshall proposed that the United States give aid to needy European countries. This assistance program, called the Marshall Plan, would provide food, machinery, and other materials to rebuild Western Europe. As Congress debated on the $12.5 billion program in 1948, the communists seized power in Czechoslovakia. Congress immediately voted approval. The plan was a spectacular success. Even communist Yugoslavia received aid after it broke away from Soviet domination. The Berlin Airlift. While Europe began rebuilding, the United States and its allies clashed with the Soviet Union over Germany. The Soviets wanted to keep their former enemy weak and divided, but in 1948, France, Britain, and the United States decided to withdraw their forces from Germany and allow their occupation zones to form one nation. The Soviet Union responded by holding West Berlin hostage. Although Berlin lay well within the Soviet occupation zone of Germany, it too had been divided into 4 zones. The Soviet Union cut off highway, water, and rail traffic into Berlin's western zone. The city faced starvation. Stalin gambled that the Allies would surrender West Berlin or give up their idea of reunifying Germany. But American and British officials flew food and supplies into West Berlin for nearly 11 months. In May 1949, the Soviet Union admitted defeat and lifted the blockade.
Okay. So as we were just talking about, 11 months. Can you guys imagine? No coal, no water, all of it had no food, everything had to be flown in. And you couldn't just leave, right? So you had your house in Berlin if it was left still standing after World War II, but you now can't leave, you can't get supplies, and you're totally dependent on the U.S. and Britain to be able to provide for you if you're in West Berlin, right? Okay. Would you pick the next person, Nancy? Okay, be loud, Randy.
The Cold War divides the world. These conflicts marked the start of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War is a struggle over political differences carried on by means short of military action or war. Beginning in 1949, the superpowers used spying, propaganda, diplomacy, and secret operations in their dealings with each other. Much of the world allied with one side or the other. In fact, until the Soviet Union finally broke up in 1991, the Cold War dictated not only U.S. and Soviet foreign policy, but influenced world alliances as well. Superpowers formed rival alliances. The Berlin blockade heightened Western Europe's fears of Soviet aggression. As a result, in 1949, 10 Western European nations joined the United States and Canada to form a defensive military alliance. It was called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. An attack on any NATO member would be met with armed force by all member nations. The Soviet Union saw NATO as a threat and formed its own alliance in 1955. It was called the Warsaw Pact and included the Soviet Union, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Albania. In 1961, the East Germans built a wall to separate East and West Berlin. The Berlin Wall symbolized a world divided into rival camps. However, not every country joined the new alliances. Some, like India, chose not to align with either side. and China, the largest communist country, came to distrust the Soviet Union. It remained non-aligned. The threat of nuclear war. As these alliances were forming, the Cold War threatened to heat up and not destroy the world. The United States already had atomic bombs. In 1949, the Soviet Union exploded its own atomic bomb weapon. President Truman was determined to develop a more deadly weapon before the Soviets did. He authorized work on a thermonuclear weapon in 1950. The hydrogen or H-bomb would be thousands of times more powerful than the A-bomb. Its power came from the fusion or joining together of atoms rather than the splitting of atoms as in the A-bomb. In 1952, the United States tested the first H-bomb. The Soviets exploded their own in 1953. Dwight D. Eisenhower became the U.S. president in 1953. He appointed the firmly anti-communist John Foster Dulles as the Secretary of State. The Soviet Union or its supporters attacked U.S. interests. Dulles threatened the United States would retaliate instantly by means and at places of our own people. The willingness to go to the brink or edge of war became known as brinkmanship. Brinkmanship required a reliable source of nuclear weapons and airplanes to deliver them. So the United States strengthened its air force and began producing stockpiles of nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union responded with its own military buildup, beginning an arms race that could go on for 4 decades. The Cold War in disguise. The Cold War also affected the science and education programs of the two countries. In August 1957, the Soviets announced the development of a rocket that could travel great distances. An intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM. On October 4th, the Soviets used an ICBM to push Sputnik, the first unmanned satellite, above the Earth's atmosphere. Americans felt they had fallen behind in science and technology, and the government poured money into science education. In 1958, the United States launched its own satellite. In 1960, the skies again provided the arena for superpower conflict. 5 years earlier, Eisenhower had proposed that the United States and Soviet Union be able to fly over each other's territory to guard against surprise nuclear attacks. The Soviet Union said no. In response, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency started secret high-altitude spy flights over Soviet territory and planes called U-2s. In May 1960, the Soviets shot down a U-2 plane and its pilot, Francis Gary Powers, was captured. This U-2 incident heightened Cold War tensions. While Soviet communists were scoring off against the United States, communists in China were fighting a civil war for control of that country.
Okay, so guys, think about that. You're flying in a U-2 plane, which flies really high up in the atmosphere, taking pictures, and you get shot down and captured. What do you think that did to heighten everything? Allison, would you pass these out for me? One for everyone. So Allison is going to pass out your causes of the Cold War that I want you guys to work on. But before we do that, let's do a quick whip around. Do you guys remember when we did that before? No, you don't remember. Okay, we're going to start with Miguel, and you're going to give me a cause or consequence of the Cold War, since we've just been reading about it, and you're going to use these to fill in. So let's just do it quickly, because then you guys can work in your table groups. Complete this before you start your writing assignment. Miguel, you want to start us off? You can do an event that contributed to it, or a cause, an actual reason.
Oh, the division of Berlin caused?
Okay? It contributed to it, yeah. Thank you so much, Allison. Julian? Okay, these are supposed to be fast, so listen, start coming up with yours. Julian?
The U.S. and the Soviet Union were allies at first, but then they started to have differing goals.
Differing goals? Okay. What do you think the main differing goals were? What did Stalin want?
Oh, he signed the
What kind of government did Stalin want?
communist,
Good. And what kind of government did the U.S.?
democratic.
Good. Okay. So we have the Soviet Union wants to do a communist government, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Gabby?
Can I do effect?
Yep.
They started producing more powerful weaponry.
Okay. Good. There's competition for more weaponry. Josue, you're up.
Divided Germany into like 4 parts.
Okay. So we've already had the division of Berlin. So give me a different one. You can do it.
I don't know. The Soviet Union lost the Sputnik.
I'm sorry, what?
Sputnik.
They launched Sputnik. That was definitely a result of the increase in competition for technology. Myra?
The Warsaw Pact?
The Warsaw Pact. Okay. Whoever wants to go.
Nuclear bombs they went from bad to worse, basically.
Okay.
Like
In what way?
We advanced them to, well, not we per se. Okay, well, they were advanced. They were updated to be far more deadly, far more powerful, to go longer distances, etc., etc.
Okay.
Can I say something about the space race?
Yep.
Well, in 1961, the first American went to space, and like the United States and the Soviet Union were fighting to compete, who got into space faster.
And what was the space race an example of a competition? What were we competing with the Soviet Union over? Feel free to be filling these in, guys, on your fishbone diagrams, because this will help you out. Yeah, as we're discussing. We were competing over science and technology, right?
Yeah, space exploration.
Yeah, in space. Okay. Jenny?
Can I say that after
Mm-hmm.
the Soviets announced the development of the rocket?
Okay. So, do you know what kind of rocket in particular?
A ballistic missile.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone know what that means? Rudy. Google it. Who knows what an ICBM is? An intercontinental ballistic missile. Do you know, Rudy?
Yeah, it's an intercontinental.
Good.
Okay,
Thank
it's
you.
a rocket that can go,
Right.
across.
So before the U.S. felt like we were protected, right? Because we had oceans between us and Russia. Let me see if I can.
And is that what the elephant meant?
I'm failing at the map thing here.
That's okay, so do I. If you, okay,
What's the trick?
pull it again. Okay, now the very first map talks about slavery, but it has a nice sort of shot of the world.
Oh, it's got a good world view. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So before, right, lots of ocean. Now, what you can't see that it shows better on a globe is Russia's right up about here. The U.S. is right here. We've got the North Pole between us, right? So if you're going to shoot an ICBM, the shortest path is actually over the North Pole. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I don't know if you guys remember, but my husband was on submarines for a long time. He was on the kind of boats, they're called missile boats, or ballistic missile submarines, that hide in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. And their job when they are on alert is to, if we ever go to war and they get the order, is to pop up, shoot an ICBM, go back down, and get out of there. So the idea is that it's called a first strike capability. It's considered a deterrent for mutually assured destruction, right? Because we can pop up presumably anywhere in the world, shoot off a missile, and get them before they get us. You know, now the problem with that is we know they're going to send something back once we do it, right? It's part of mutually assured destruction. So if it's Russia, China, several European nations all have this capability. But that's what they're there for, is as a deterrent. So what happens is, what the invention of the ICBM is, we no longer feel safe all the way over here on the East Coast or in Los Angeles, because they now have the capability to not have to put a boat out there that we could go looking for with a submarine, right? Or a boat. Instead, they can just shoot it from where they are, and it can go several thousand miles. So this is why, guys, current day events, we're worried about, which country are we worried about with nuclear weapons? There's two major ones.
Korea and
North Korea, good.
North Korea and
Who's the other one? You guys are hearing about it a lot in the news right now. President Obama is negotiating with them. Well, John Kerry is Secretary of State.
somewhere in the Middle East, right?
Somewhere in the Middle East. Did I hear it?
What?
Not Cuba. We
Oh,
did
Saudi
just
Arabia?
open relations with them. That is very current events.
Saudi
Starts with an I.
Oh.
Not you got it, Randy. Iran, right? So Iran cut diplomatic ties with us. I think 89. I'll have to look that up. But we're worried about two nations currently developing. So Iran is actively developing nuclear weapons. North Korea has already developed a nuclear weapon, but they don't have a delivery system, right? If you can't get the bomb to us, you're still a threat, because you've got a guy who thinks or says he's willing to use a nuclear weapon, but he can't get it to us. Now, what they've been doing lately is they've been test firing missiles, and let's see if I can get to the right map. Okay, this won't be on camera, but everyone look at the big map behind the camera.
Sorry, camera.
We'll apologize to my classmates. So, right, so over here you have the other half of the Pacific Ocean, right? So, with North Korea, you know, yes, they're a threat, but no, they can't get that missile to us. So that's what we're really worried about. Now, they're test firing missiles, which makes South Korea super nervous, and all of North Korea's neighbors, right? Because nobody wants a guy with the capability to actually send his nuclear bomb somewhere. But that's why this is important, because there's North Korea. So Japan's worried, China's a little bit worried, right? All the countries that would be in range are worried about this capability. And that's why they keep sending lots of aid to North Korea in hopes to pacify. And every time the North Korean regime needs more international aid and food, they do a missile test or threaten to use their bomb. Okay, does anyone have any questions about ICBMs? Because that was a good answer. Okay, Susanna, can you give us another cause or effect?
A Yinsen thing was shot down and it heightened Cold War tensions.
Okay, good. Anadelli? You guys have had a lot of time. Keep going.
The Cold War threatened to heat up and not to destroy it.
It threatened what?
To destroy the world.
And how did it threaten to destroy the world? That's true. But back that statement up with some evidence. What did we talk about earlier with MAD? What does MAD stand for? Allison. Got this. Oh, sorry, not Allison. Where am I? What does MAD stand for?
Mutually assured destruction.
Thank you, Gabby. Mutually assured destruction. So how does that threaten to destroy the world? If we shoot a missile at them, they will
retaliate.
They will retaliate and shoot a missile back, right? Okay. Yes, Rudy.
You know, to today's standards, not back then.
Yep.
How strong is the strongest nuclear weapon that we have now?
That's an excellent question, one I'm not familiar with, because most of that information is classified. I mean, have you guys
That
ever?
we know of them.
Well, I will look that up and get back to you on that, Rudy, because I don't know what the U.S. government has publicly released. So.
Sorry.
That's okay. Mrs. Thomas is the only one allowed to have her cell phone out here. So, Annabelle, did you give me a reason? I need a reason. We're doing this whip around style.
Oh, well, was there lots of traffic this morning?
All right. Who wants to start us off over here?
I'm doing
Go.
okay. I got a
Go
meeting
right
this
in.
morning, and now my city teacher is
Sorry, bud.
and I'm observing and working on grades and stuff.
All right. So it's NATO. Just so you know. So NATO, which stands for, what does NATO stand for?
So, anyway, I hope the rest of your trip up
Good.
is uneventful.
And do we still participate in NATO today? Rudy, Myra, Nathan? Do we still participate in NATO today?
Love you. Bye-bye.
Focus. Do we still participate in NATO today, guys?
No.
Who can tell me?
No.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. We do. Still around. Okay. Peacekeeping organization. In the 90s, we contributed the most troops. Went to Africa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You guys would have been little, but maybe you might remember this. Okay. Give me another reason over here. Who's next? Okay.
Stalin's reluctance to permit elections.
Okay. So Stalin did not want to allow democratic elections, right? In his Soviet satellites, right? And sorry, I have the map up. And we've all determined I can't work the map, so it's not coming back. All right, give me another reason.
You gotta throw it over.
The Cold War also affected the science and education programs.
Okay. In what way? So what did the U.S. feel like we were behind in?
Science and technology.
Good. So what did we pour a lot of money into?
Science and
Technology.
technology.
So what do we
Education.
currently feel like we're behind in today compared to China?
Technology.
Math.
Math and science and technology. So what's the acronym that you guys keep seeing pop up at schools? I heard, be louder. You know it, you just said it.
No, I didn't.
It's the acronym, STEM, right? Okay, so it's still a big push. Look at this. We're out of the Cold War, right?
I thought Japan was the leading country in technology.
Well, they are a leading country, but you know, the U.S. is the #1 exporter in the world. And what do we export? We export technology, computer circuit boards, and other things.
Well, but we're talking about the creation of technology, not exporting. Because exporting is the whole.
You know, Silicon Valley for computers and processors and things.
By exporting, do you mean like shipping it off, or do you mean as in creating?
Creating.
And then,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then.
Yeah, creating. Because yes, it can be manufactured in China, right? But we're pioneering a lot of that intellectual property, right?
Doesn't Japan though have a lot higher technology than us though?
They incorporate a lot more technology into their daily lives, right? With smart houses and lots of integration.
But it's basically the same as us, only we don't use it as much as they do.
That's correct.
Oh.
Plus, they have to be much more efficient because they're a much smaller area, right? So, like with public transportation, you have to have good public transportation, and you can afford to put it in such a small area.
Yeah.
So, but the U.S. is a huge landmass compared to Japan and even most of Europe. I mean, France is the biggest country in Europe, and it's the size of Texas. So it's a lot easier to put an integrated rail system in a space the size of Texas, right? And what do you do with, you've got Wyoming, North Dakota, you've got large areas that aren't really inhabited by lots of people. It's farming, right, and ranching.
Well, as of now.
So, okay, moving along. 2 more? 3 more? Who has an answer? Go for it. Okay, Julie.
The YouTube.
Okay, so that's already come up.
Economic turmoil.
Okay, and what about the economic turmoil? Who was in turmoil? How was the U.S. sitting? We talked about it at the beginning and then we read about it. How are we doing, the U.S.? Were we in turmoil economically? No. So who was in turmoil?
Berlin.
Okay. Yeah, Russia, right? And the Soviet countries, right? So you read about it. Who did we give money to when they broke away from Russia? Sorry, say that a little bit louder. Yeah, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, right? Yugoslavia broke away from Soviet control, they got more money from us because we were like, hey, we're rewarding your non-use, breaking away from communist control. We're going to reward you with aid, right? And that was part of the Marshall Plan, right? So Marshall was a famous general during World War II. You see, he then becomes Secretary of State, right? After World War II. And he assists in rebuilding Europe through aid, right? Because if you have money, you can build factories and start producing things and get raw materials, and you can rebuild your economy and pay your people, and they're not starving, and they can send their kids back to school, right? Can you do that if your economy is in shambles and, you know, all of the countryside in France have been bombed to smithereens, right? Because most of World War II was fought in this area, right? Between Germany and France, some down here in Italy. But a lot of it was just across the swath. So those countries needed aid to rebuild. Okay, so you've all given some good ideas. I want you to work in your small groups to complete your diagrams, Rudy.
Are most of those effects?
So you can give me the causes and effect. So yes.
Oh wait, so it's cause and effect.
Yeah, you yes, sorry. The effect got cut off when I did my spreadsheet, or my concept map. And before we do that, can you guys tell me why we use concept maps? Because I know you guys have been working on that on the district-wide policy. Why do we use them?
To map out a concept.
Yes, but without using the words to define the word, Rudy, why do we use them?
To put our thoughts in order.
Good, to organize your thoughts, right? Help you understand. Okay, go ahead and complete these. Work in your small groups. And then I'll walk around, we'll talk about it, and then once your group has completed your concept map, you guys can get started on writing your 2-paragraph writing assignment on why the US and Soviet Union felt they had to expand their spheres of influence. For extra credit, you can do the workbook pages for chapter 17, section 1. There have been some questions about, is extra credit available? And remember, overall, we're relating to this, to your big idea that you worked on with Mrs. Thomas, and that power comes in many forms. And your essential question that we're answering is, how does ideology impact conflict? So that goes into our spread of the spheres of influence, right? With the U.S. being worried that communism is spreading, and Russia being worried that democracy and capitalism are spreading.
Oh, it's referred to as a red scare, right?
The Red Scare.
That's what it's referred to? Or is that
that is part of what it develops into later with McCarthyism, which we're going to address in the next section. So, okay. Any questions? Okay. I'll wander. Keep working. Get started on your writing assignment. Handouts are due to me as you walk out of the room, so make sure you put your name and your period on it so you guys can get points. And then if you complete your writing assignment, you can hand that to me on the way out as well.
Rudy, come here.
No, you can just do causes and effects. Yes. I mean, it might help you learn more if it's one-to-one, but you know, some causes might have 2 different things, right? Are we doing
Starting in May.
Alright.
Not gonna be,
Causes and effects.
it won't be
It doesn't necessarily have to be one-to-one.
this week,
Okay.
because we did all that testing, so we don't really have anything. So we'll start again on the 1st,
Any questions?
and I'll go through that.
Keep working. How's it going over here? Close way, get moving. You know, this done by the end of class, including your writing assignment. Okay, so you guys are good with this being like causes and that's effects, right? And it's not, doesn't always have to be one-to-one, right? Some causes will have more than one effect, right? Okay.
I go around like this and then go down.
Yeah. But make sure you fill it in, yeah.
You have to fill out every single one.
Yes. I want you to mark up the sheet because it will help you complete your writing assignment. Okay, because it'll be a really easy writing assignment. You can look at it and be like, this is why the U.S. was worried and spread their sphere of influence, yeah? So, Like English class, for your paragraphs, I'd really appreciate like opening sentence, right? Your claim, your 3 supporting sentences, and your conclusion sentence. Write well-formed paragraphs. I know you guys can do it. I've seen your DBQ essays. Okay, are you guys good over here with causes and effects? Okay, sorry. Okay. Any questions? No? You good? You go? What does the face mean? Okay. Okay. All right. Bree, would you keep the drumming to a low roar? Thank you.
So this is cause and effect.
God bless you.
What's not practice? And then for the effects?
One paragraph on the U.S. whether spirit of influence of one paragraph on why Russia was about their spirit of influence. We've got this.
So like I never tried anything.
Okay, keep working. 25 minutes. Most of you can get this done before you leave class. The writing assignment is due at the beginning of next class. You guys have just written all these DBQ essays. You got this.
Right there.
Mrs. Lopez? Good morning. How are you this morning? I'm good. Did Christian have a restful night? Okay, good.
You complain. Right.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that. Now, you're going for the blood transfusion today, is that right? Okay. Let me do this then. I will call you when I'm finished with Jackie, and if you're home, I will drop off the work that I have for him, and that can be as easy as I'll call you, you can come out to the gate and just pick it up for him. If not, I'll go ahead and I'll plan to come by tomorrow. Would that work for you? Okay. That way, at least if he feels like it, he has it there to do. And we'll table this till next week, but I still need to talk to you guys about the senior exit portfolio, because I'm beginning to think more and more that I need to talk to the people at the Saddleback office about maybe getting him an alternative assignment, unless I can agree with Christian that he feels up to doing that. He isn't gonna have to do the interview, but it is quite a bit of work, and he just may not be up to it, so. Okay, so we'll just kind of play that one by ear for the moment, all right? Okay, very good. So hopefully things go well, and I see you for a little bit this afternoon. Okay, very good. Take care. Bye.
Okay.
Did you take the check for 16?
I never heard part of that. What caused the Marshall plan?
Which one was that one?
What do you guys think? What happened to Germany after World War II? You guys think back? They got really angry, right? They had all that debt and they didn't
I
get any
just
help
was so
rebuilding their
magnanimous
factories.
and thumbs are great at it. Now you're
Starving,
complaining?
and everyone got really resentful.
Complaining.
So Marshall
You
decided.
are.
Saw what
I'm not, but I mean,
You
World
are.
War I, right?
but what if someone gets your change? What if a nice cashier lady gets your change wrong? You're obviously gonna go back and
Connect that.
get
Why did
change.
they do the plan?
I love that. What if the nice kid, as opposed to the creepy character?
Germany, right?
Well, that'd be
And
me
other
calling it.
World War II countries.
Because it's an analogy.
It's entirely
Yeah,
possible.
that's right, because we gave them lots of money.
World War II. What was this one?
So for that, you know, the Marshall Plan, you know, for rebuilding, right? So
Did you do this one?
we gave them a lot of
She
aid
collected that?
and other countries in Europe, right? To rebuild and not go communist.
Look in the shop, as a matter of fact.
So that's how we were increasing our sphere of influence, right?
This is period 6. Get the work for period 6
Yeah,
and tax it.
right, yeah, I like that.
Because it's possible you can put your name on it.
That's right, so we were trying to keep.
That's
what
why you
happened
have a
after World
0
War I
if you
from
check
happening
it.
This is period
World War
6, right?
II,
No, no
right?
label.
Because we're giving them aid, we're not making it. I mean, Germany from the States,
Oh, I see.
reparation war.
4 or 5.
Oh, which one did
Like, it actually pushed teams off. Just give you but we gave them a lot of money and they rebuilt, and now they're a leading nation in the world, right? And they're not, because the goal is about to start another world war. Okay. Good for it. How's it going over here?
Chapter 16 test, right?
Yeah.
President Truman.
You guys guys do really well.
Harriet Truman. He became president after World War I.
Marshall Plan. So what happened in Germany after World War
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I did. Actually, I don't think I did take that one. Might have been absent, maybe.
And what happened? They got rid of bitter and angry, right? And then what happened 20 years after that? World War II. Good. So, the Marshall Plan, right, was the south. Countries that become bitter and disenfranchised, and majority. Marshall used the Marshall Plan. So that 20 years after World War II,
Dude. Careful. Jump through this.
a lot of rebuild these countries and make them more allies, right? So that's something we're looking to see a spread of our sphere of influence, right? Okay, what are we doing over here? Good. Okay, you got your worksheet then?
Yeah, she's just.
Okay. Okay. How are you doing today? Yeah, okay. So, something we'll talk about at the other table, before I spill my tea everywhere, was the Marshall Plan, right? So an example of the Marshall Plan is how one of the ways you spread our sphere of influence, right? So we went ahead and what happened in Germany after World War I?
You need help?
So it's okay, you don't even have to go back. What happened in Germany after World War I? That's right, they were blamed. And what happened? They got really angry and defensive, right? They didn't have money to rebuild, they had hyperinflation, right? So 20 years after World War I, what happened? Good, World War II happened. So you have people who get angry and bitter as they move forward. They get angry and bitter, and you end up with more conflict, right? So Marshall's plan, by spending a lot of U.S. money in aid in Europe after World War II, was to keep weapons. Good. So by using our sphere of influence and our aid dollars, U.S. was able to really help rebuild Western Europe. And now, most of Western Europe are our allies, right? Okay, and Germany is one of our trade partners. We do a lot with them. We consider to have a very close relationship with them. They're a leader in the EU, right? So that's one example. The Marshall Plan is one example of how the U.S. spread our sphere of influence, right? So that'll help you guys when you're writing your paragraphs. So, okay, keep working. All right. It's okay if you want to check out. Hey, good work. Good job.
Me too.
What's this phrase? Is your worksheet done ready? I know you're passing on papers. Here. Why don't I pass those out and you can work? You're welcome. Eduardo, why don't you let me finish passing those out? Did you start your paragraphs? You want to start your paragraphs or you want to pass it? You want to pass out? Okay. You still have to do those though. Alright. No, but thank you for that. I actually don't like chocolate. What? I know. What? I don't like chocolate. How is that possible?
You don't like what?
I don't like chocolate.
Oh, I gotta go to your house on Halloween.
Yeah, actually, it all goes to my husband's work.
She's gonna give up. She's gonna give you raisins. Ah, you not like that.
So that was part of the technology, right? You, yeah.
What?
Yes.
What did you put for
Okay. Don't worry, we've got this. Thank you, girl. Alright. You get full.
That's all I wanted to do.
the Soviet Union with just one of
ICBM, economic turmoil, Europe's fear of Soviet aggression, and they lifted the blockade.
Okay, so ICBM and all the other stuff, and then it lifted the blockade.
That was me. You can tell I graded those. I gave them. Out of 100. So I graded it more than a letter grade. What don't you get about it? It was out of. So no, it's. So you know how she gives you a 1, 2, 3, 4? So you divide it by 4, and that'll give you the percentage. And multiply by 100.
Sorry.
And then multiply by 100. Okay. Does that make sense now? Yeah. So maybe plus 4 scales. Okay, keep working on your spreadsheets because these are due by the end of class. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. You might hold it. Here you go. Here you go. God bless you.
What was this out of 5?
4.
Oh, okay.
Because she had me use the 1 to 4. So then you divide by 4 and multiply by 100 to get your percentage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what to write.
I got 3.75. Let's see.
Can I always write small?
75%.
Ah, sorry, I was embarrassed. I was looking at yours.
25 behind it.
Good for you.
I'm kidding. 75. You check my grades.
Oh, I was like, what'd you get?
Alright, keep working.
Stuff like you.
The Soviet Union was keeping the West Berlin hostage, and they cut off power, water, and the rail traffic, and kept them in starvation. Oh.
Cooper? Yes. When you were talking about the peace organization earlier, you said that we were in Africa. Have you seen the movie Hotel Rwanda?
I'm sorry, what about Rwanda?
Have you seen the movie Hotel Rwanda?
No, I have not. Was it good?
Yes. But I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
That's what we were there for. It was like in Africa there was 2 groups divided based on skin color.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was the dark one,
the Hutus and
lighter
the
dark.
Tutsis.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That actually happened. The whole conflict with that. So we had to send our people over there.
Yep.
They weren't separated in the skin color though. They were separated by their ethnicity, like whether they were.
But you were identified by skin.
That's so apartheid in South Africa was based on skin color because you had Dutch white settlers who subjugated the local African population.
That was in Rwanda though.
But no, Rwanda was the Hutus and the Tutsis. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were like.
I mean, sometimes skin color can be used. Like some groups are more ethnically more fair than others. So I don't know specifically if that's what they did, but it was an ethnic conflict, and we did some peacekeeping forces. I think in '96, but I have to look that up. So you're recommending that I see Hotel Rwanda? Okay, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Did you have a guy from Miami?
I'm sorry, what? Not, okay. Alright, how's your concept maps going over here? You guys finished?
Yeah.
Okay, start writing your paragraphs because it will help you. Okay, and I'm collecting the concept maps on your way out the door.
I might have seen that, I think.
Concept maps?
Isn't there like
It's
that
due
one
tomorrow.
guy from Iron Man?
It's a PM day. So guys,
The
your
guy
paragraphs you
inside
don't have the
the-
weekend, they're due tomorrow when
Inside
we walk
the
into
war
class.
machines.
What? And if you need extra credit in here, you can do the workbook pages and the other sections I'm not teaching you.
We can also
Do 17.1. Do the one that matches the chapter we just
today
read.
as we walked out or tomorrow.
The workbook pages, bring them
The
tomorrow.
Great Purge.
And bring your paragraphs tomorrow. Do it at the beginning of class. What?
Great.
The workbook, if you need extra credit, do 17.1, which I can look that up for you. And then if you need, but the paragraphs due at the beginning of class tomorrow. You guys
Great Purge.
Great banter. You know what that means?
Great banter.
Banter.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
It's just like kind of like your own time, but it's like a drama class.
I wonder.
I really had to try to do anything, but I had this one where you got like you're on your phone, and then you had to
Chicharito.
Yeah,
there's still goals.
Yeah, I'll say
That is whatever. It was so hard to like yes, what is?
How is note making him 2 times the scoring?
Oh my god. David Luis. He sucks. He needs to retire.
So, for extra credit, if you guys want to do the workbook page, 95, 96. Okay?
He was part of the squad that lost 7-1 against Germany.
95, 96.
95. You mean chapter
Actually,
section 1, right?
Yeah, let's see. The workbook pages listed here don't match the chapter.
Yeah, it's different. Farage is 71.
Be the best trio in the world.
Okay. Is it
71 for
71? Alright, let me see your book.
Neymar's just third to score. Neymar's just third to make it a mouthpiece.
Okay, write 2 paragraphs. First on why the U.S. spread their sphere of influence, and the second one on why the USSR spread their sphere of influence. So your cause and effect maps are giving you reasons for your 3 supporting sentences. So do an opening sentence, your 3 supporting sentences, and your closing sentence. Okay? Okay. Alright, so yeah, guys, do page 71, 72 for extra credit in the workbook. Actually, sorry, just do 71. Don't do 72. Because we haven't done that chapter. We haven't done China yet. Tomorrow, China.
Only page what?
71. It's extra credit. You don't have to do it.
71? Sweet.
I am doing everything. So I can have a high beat.
Alright, we have about 7 minutes and concept maps will be on their way out the door, so start your paragraphs.
I have 83 or 82. You ready for that?
Oh, just hit it with that.
Thin book, right?
You suck
The
workbook.
Yeah,
Great back.
Those Beatles.
Yeah, keep going.
It's like
Whole box that drops.
They're gonna play who too. Oh yeah, huh?
I don't want to play fair. No,
Because now I'm getting motivated. They beat. No, they're motivated because they beat everything.
They're lucky they only won the championship. If they're lucky, they can't win the Liga, they can't win the Copa del Rey.
They might win the Liga.
I don't have spots.
America's gonna win the Copa Champions. Third.
One thing, so NATO was formed, right?
It's too next week.
Because the U.S. was worried about Russian policies, right? And then what did
Chivas. Left wing Malta yesterday for this. That's against Puebla. Against Puebla.
Oh, you're mad about that too?
I like
happy.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Oh, even with all mad.
Chivas. How would they lose against Puebla? It's like the worst team. Chivas in the I can't wait for this weekend. America has control. Burn to Chivas. No, I hate Chivas. There's no
Chivas, all that worry for nothing, dude.
What word?
God, everyone's asking to the people.
Dude, that's a Copa MX. Anyone can win that.
What are we doing over here?
If Chivas can make it to the final,
Start
anybody
your
can.
paragraphs, please. Thank you. We're due tomorrow, as we'll get them done now.
They're done.
Is your paragraph done? Paragraphs? You got it, yeah. Homework too.
Just finish with this.
Okay.
If I finish, I mean, the work.
It is homework, but you might take a picture of a worksheet if you're going to need it.
This?
Yeah, because those are your reasons that you're going to write into your paragraphs, right? Work smart, not hard.
We're smarter, not harder. That's my motto.
Right? So use your reasons for your paragraph. Do you need this to write your paragraph?
I learned it from my
No. You need yours to write your paragraph? You good? Okay. Okay.
Did you see when they missed penalty?
Oh, it's mine?
Oh, I had some toast pizza at home. Dude, I had it last night.
Sorry, did I walk in the way of your picture, Gabby?
Stuff you all in the toast.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the writing assignment? Class is almost over. 2 paragraphs, well developed. Opening sentence, 3 supporting sentences, conclusion sentence about the spread of the U.S. and USSR sphere of influence.
Wait, so for, it's only section 1, not section 1,
Yeah, just do, and workbook page 71 for extra credit. Right? And I'm taking your diagram on the way out the door. Your concept maps.
He's old, but he's still a beast. He's slow. Old but old. He's slow, but you know, he still has that foot.
Okay, guys, I'm going to take these as you walk out the door. Everyone have a great day.
What?
Oh, sorry, guys. Bring your imperialism packets. We'll collect those tomorrow. Oh, you want me to do it?
It's funny.
He's giving a grade for those. Bring your imperialism packet.
Do you know Veggie's middle name is
Thank you.
Dude, you know, hey.
Thank you.
Official
Thank you. Do you want me to? Hey.
You know Maria?
Yeah.
Middle name
Have
is
yours.
Oh,
Miguel, do I have yours?
I'm gonna put them to school there and
Josue, do I have yours?
I'll love to see.
Miguel, do I have yours? Yep, I've got yours. Okay, thanks, guys.
I just noticed the camera's still on and class
Yeah,
is
did
over,
I
so.
take yours? Oh, thank you. I have yours, Rudy. All right, thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.